Place. Good afternoon, members, and welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Education, Skills and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee on the 12th of September 2024. I am Councillor Rebecca Phillips and I will be chairing this meeting. Before we move on to the next agenda item, just some housekeeping rules. I know we are all fully aware, but just to remind you that the meeting will be recorded. Please can you ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting? Can members and officers who are present in the chamber please use their microphones when speaking? When asked to raise your hand, can members who are attending virtually raise your electronic hand, and members who are in the chamber please raise your physical hand? I would like to welcome members who are not part of this committee to the meeting, Councillors Cathy Jones and Councillor Sarah Thomas, along with members of the public and of course all the officers that we have in the chamber here this afternoon. Diolch yn fawr. Now I will move on to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Adam Amor, please.
So I've got a personal interest on Scrutiny Committee Agenda 4C in the West. I've got a son in Yslyn Bod Dir and another son in Rosafon, and they're mentioned in there, that's all.
Lovely, diolch yn fawr. Any other declarations of interest? No. Okay, thank you very much. Pamela will make sure that you receive the relevant document.
Sorry, I'm in trouble with my computer. I have to declare an interest on item 4F, Kevin Syson. I'm a chair of governors at Kevin Syson Comprehensive.
Lovely, thank you very much, Councillor Rees. Moving on to agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. You will see the minutes attached on pages 5 to 12 of your agenda pack. If you feel that these minutes are an accurate record of the meeting, can you please propose for the minutes, please? Can I have a proposer and a seconder?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Second, Chair.
Thank you very much. If members do not indicate to the contrary, I will take it that these minutes are approved.
I can see no indications, Chair. Those minutes are approved.
Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr. Moving on to agenda item 4, to consider items from the Cabinet Forward Work Programme. We will now move to consider the reports as selected by this committee for consideration. Agenda item 4A, Celtic Leisure, pages 13 to 48. This report is for decision. Please note that appendices B and C attached at the agenda item 10A are private. Can we please take questions firstly on the public papers? Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just give a brief sort of synopsis and a bit of a history to why we've ended up where we are, and then obviously happy to take any questions then, Chair. So this is all in the report, but many of you will remember spring 2022, a decision was taken to insource Celtic Leisure back into the council. That transfer has, to date, been delayed. It was delayed from April 24 and subsequently April 25 on the grounds of unaffordability. The difference with where we are now is the contract with Celtic actually comes to an end in March 2025. So that's why members actually have to take a decision on October the 2nd. Obviously, this is the scrutiny around that because we can't just defer for another year. The contract actually comes to an end. So to do something different from insourcing, a member decision is required. There's provision in the current contract to extend with Celtic up for a period of up to 5 years. To that end, in March 24, members agreed to formally approach Celtic, which is a requirement within the contract, to ask them would they be interested in extending the contract. So members gave me that authority. I wrote to them. They came back to me in May, said yes, they would. They'd be willing to consider an extension, but only for 5 years, nothing, no less. Back last January, there was a request from the trade unions that senior members of the council, Celtic and trade unions got together in a meeting. And at that meeting with Celtic staff, they requested a working group be established, and that working group has been meeting since February this year, and I'll talk about that again in a little bit. So The report today for scrutiny details 3 options. There's continue with the insourcing, April the 1st, 2025. There's the option to extend the contract with Celtic for a period of 5 years. And there's also an option to extend the contract for 5 years, but with revised conditions of service of the staff brought forward by the trade unions. And, we can pick that up in a minute. The cost of each one of the 3 options is detailed within the report, the private part of the report, as you referred to, Chair, Appendix B and C. I think one of the consequences of the working group is that, for a long time, I think the trade unions were questioning the accuracy of some of the costs of insourcing Celtic that we've brought forward previously. So I think now there's a recognition that those costs, circa £1.5 million contained within the appendices, they are actually reasonably accurate, and they're as accurate as they possibly can be given the circumstances. And I think that's probably, in part at least, why the trade union position has changed on this issue. And now the trade unions are of the opinion that insourcing Celtic is unaffordable, and that's certainly the view of officers. And I'll explain why in a second. So as I say, the trade union position now is insourcing is unaffordable. So the officer recommendation is recommendation 2, because our assessment is that it offers the best value for money. It's the most affordable option going forward. And I think there are some real benefits as well, which members need to understand in terms of recommendation 2. To be fair to the Celtic staff and the Celtic board, there's been a lot of to and fro, and we've delayed the insourcing, and the board and the staff have been magnificent in the way they've sort of been patient with us. But option 2, recommendation 2, gives certainty to Celtic staff for a period of 5 years. It treats Celtic as a company in exactly so that the terms of the contract, it's proposing that we treat Celtic in exactly the same way as we treat any other council service, in that every year there's an annual negotiation where if we make assumptions in council budgets that we're going to uplift pay by 3%, then we'll uplift the pay in Celtic by 3%. If we're going to give a 50% uplift in energy costs to council services, then we'll do the same for Celtic. And that hasn't been the case previously. So I think that puts the business on a much better footing and so it gives them sustainability. The contract also talks about a £1 million investment fund being available to them. So they will, if members approve this on October the 2nd, they will appoint a new chief exec. And what we've said is within 6 months of the chief exec starting, we will expect a business plan and business case for up to £1 million worth of investment to help drive income or reduce costs, or hopefully both, to make the business more sustainable in the first instance, but also less of a burden on the council taxpayer of Neath Talbot. And I think that's a really important point. We've got a cost of living crisis right across the country, but let's focus on Neath Talbot for a second. We've got a cost of living crisis. People are struggling to pay the bills. We do not need to add to the council tax bill on the back of insourcing a service which there is no need to do that. Crucially, it protects jobs in Celtic leisure for the reasons I've just said, because they've got those inflationary increases year on year. It protects services and facilities in Celtic, so no need for facility closures. Also, it protects jobs in the council, because any further pressure on the council will inevitably bring pressure on jobs in the council, services in the council. And as I said, it reduces the burden on the council taxpayer in Neath Talbot going forward. We will very soon be bringing forward plans to members in terms of closing the gap that we have financially as a council. And I'm sure he would agree with me that we do not need to add to the pressures that we are facing already, where we could well be, as a council, looking at service cuts, job losses next year. There's a Chancellor statement on October the 30th. All the mood music is things are going to get worse, not better, on the back of that. With that uncertainty, I think having a 5-year deal which protects jobs, services, inflationary increases built into the contract negotiations, that actually puts Celtic company and staff in a better position than council staff. So I think it represents the best possible deal. I do recognise the disappointment from some individuals within Celtic. I understand that. I think their patience has been magnificent. But if we want to protect jobs, we want to protect services, we want to protect the council taxpayers in Neath Talbot, that is why the officer recommendation is recommendation 2. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Diolch, Andrew. Just to remind members, any questions, if we could keep them relevant to the report in front of us and keep questions on the public aspect of the report. And we do have some indications in advance. So if I could call Councillor Reynolds firstly, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a number of questions, Chair, if you could bear with me, please. I did submit some in advance, but I've also got a few extra. I wanted to ask for clarification first on the point made by the director. There was the statement that the unions believe that the insourcing is unaffordable. That's not a situation that's been expressed to me by the unions. They have stated, and I believe it's in the APSI report that was shared with all councillors, that they understood the impact of the rates payments and what that would have if it was insourced. That statement was made. And I'd like clarification on that, because I do not believe they've said they understand it's unaffordable.
That's certainly what they've told me. Just yesterday in a meeting with the trade union, so they made that clear. I mean, obviously, they also made clear, in option C, the enhancements they would like to see with their staff, but they recognise that their position is no longer they want it in-sourced. They recognise it's unaffordable, so they understand it needs to stay where it is. But obviously, in a perfect world, they'd have the enhancements as well, which are contained within recommendation 3.
Thank you for that clarification. Mic playing up. Right. Can I also clarify in the document and what you said, Director? It was that the extension to ask Celtic, the decision to ask Celtic about the extension was made by cabinet members, not by members overall.
So I'm just trying to think if it was cabinet. Yes, it was cabinet. Yeah, cabinet. I was just trying to think if it was the old system or the new system. Yeah, it was cabinet. Yeah.
And right, on page 18, under details of the working groups, were they minuted or noted in any way? And were there any outcomes against the stated income of looking at driving down the costs of transfer as was discussed and agreed to be happening when we made the decision in 2022?
I'll pick this up, Chair, if that's okay. So, yeah, we've got notes from those meetings. I haven't got exhaustive minutes, but there are some notes. I think as we sort of put in the report, really, that the working group looked at those costs of insourcing really carefully, went through each individual line, revisited them. We managed to push some things down, the pension costs, for example. We've reviewed some other things went up slightly in that process. We also looked at other ways around the system, like how do we mitigate weekend working costs, for example, and decided not to take them forward because we would end up creating a two-tier workforce. So I think it was helpful, really, in that the working group has been able to be confident. All parties have been confident that those figures are now as accurate as they can be, as Andrew alluded to earlier.
Thanks. On the penultimate paragraph on page 18, it says that it talks about the unions being informed. Can it be confirmed that at that point in January 2024 that the cabinet members and officers met the unions to officially inform them that the leisure services would be taken back in-house in April, would not be taken back in-house in April? Council members had not been informed of any changes at that point? I personally found out from the unions.
Sorry, could you repeat the question, Sonia? I didn't quite understand it.
That when the unions were informed that the insourcing wouldn't take place by Cabinet, that that council members in general had not been informed, that there'd been no statement to council.
My memory tells me that the information around Celtic not being brought back in was done before Christmas, which is why we had the meeting with the Celtic staff to explain the situation and the trade unions in January 24. So
There was no information supplied to council. I found out through the unions, as did.
I think you made that point at the time. Yeah.
Right. There was there any consideration by the working group as well as the costs? And this is page 19 in reference, that the council of any savings the council could make on the insourcing model by co-location of services, shared use of resources, etc.
Thanks. Yeah. So where those opportunities exist, they've generally already been taken. So, for example, the exercise referrals team are now based within Neath Sports Centre and are directly co-located in there. So we are actively taking those opportunities. There might be some longer term opportunities, social services, NHS, they can all be capitalised on whichever option is taken forward today. I don't think any of the options that we've got in front of us are predicated on that. And just to note that sort of proposed investment from working with people like the NHS will take years to come to fruition. They're not quick wins. So we've been working on one particularly that's 2 or 3 years in the making, and it's probably a couple of years off happening. They don't work very quickly, some of these organizations. So I think we can carry on maximizing, and we will carry on maximizing in those opportunities as they present themselves. And so none of the options put in front of members today are based on or would stop that from happening.
You refer in the report at one point to negligible savings. That's you've quantified them and calculated them, and they're all documented somewhere.
Yeah, but I mean negligible savings. I'm thinking so that's very different to what you've just asked around the sort of the wider services, co-location of services. So there might be negligible savings around sharing, pricing within certain areas, and packaging things up and things like that as well. So we haven't worked every one of those up to some sort of detailed level, but we don't in the scheme of this they're not going to be anything that's going to make a material difference.
Thank you. And we've got page 21 under option 2. Is there any information about how the current board or senior team of Celtic Leisure is being made more resilient from that was there in 2019, remembering that this all started with, failure of the company? Yeah,
so I think it'd be fair to say the company is in a far better place now than it was then, particularly from a trading perspective. You'll see that from their accounts, but also, it comes from the sort of the changes at the leadership level within the organisation and at the board level. I think the board has now got some members who have got skill sets which are really important to running to the efficient running of Celtic Leisure, should I say. So they're in a better place. You also note that there's a sort of within the report an idea of them recruiting a new chief executive officer, and obviously that would be something we'd be very keen to be front and centre of, should we say.
But is it only the chief executive officer? Do the other members of senior staff still remain basically the same, or?
Well, there's been a general turnover. One or two have gone, but most of them, I think, is pretty steady. The majority of staff that I would have known anyway in the last 18 months or so are still there. It's been fairly steady ship.
I want there's indication under option 2 of, and I'm being careful here because obviously we've got private papers to consider later. So that talks about the investment fund and how that could drive growth. Is there any clarification on that, given that the concerns if the staff are not happy? At the moment, we've seen an improved morale. We've seen those things happen, partly because of the potential opportunities that staff saw for themselves. If those are to a great extent removed, with the terms and conditions remaining the same and little change in that, and they don't see that, with the morale that might go with that, what are the, how is that investment actually going to drive growth?
Yeah, so we would expect that the new CEO will bring forward a report or a request on how they would see to use that investment fund. So to be clear, that investment fund wouldn't go to be paid to Celtic along with the rest of the management fee. That would be held by the council and be released on us having a satisfactory business case going forward based on whether that's increasing income, reducing costs, improving services. And whilst that's something that we're looking to do to help Celtic Leisure improve, it's not entirely altruistic in that they are at the end of 5 years our facilities still, and they still need to be viable and in decent shape. So this is about us looking after the leisure facilities for the people and the local residents.
If I could just add to that same question, Sonia. So what I would expect to see is, as I said earlier, within 6 months of a new chief exec starting, them bringing forward a business case for investment, which ultimately you and members would agree. But so it would need to satisfy us that it's sensible, that it's actually going to drive income streams, or, as I said, reduce costs, ideally both. And I would expect that to be done early, because over the period of 5 years, you'd want that to be investment to happen early doors, so that we can see the benefits of that, but also Celtic see the benefits of that, over the next 5 years, if that's what happens. So we will want to see that investment upfront. So even though it's £200,000 a year notionally, what I would expect to come forward is £1 million investment request early doors, based on sound market intelligence, to drive the business, to improve the trading performance, to keep saying, to reduce the tax burden on the council taxpayers in Neath, Talbot, but also make the business more sustainable and therefore job security for the individuals. And if I may, Chair, the final question I'd like to put to the Cabinet member. Given that we've been asking for information for a long time about this, would it be your intention to assist this committee in having Celtic Leisure come before it, as we've been asking for, in order to present where things are and its business case, and make things much more transparent going into the future than they have been in the last 2 years?
Yeah, should obviously no decision has yet been made by Cabinet as to which option we would choose, but well, in any case, we would expect to have to be looking for greater performance monitoring, whether it be in-house or whether it be outsourced with Celtic Leisure. And I understand that there is, within the proposed contract in option 2 and 3, that the CEO would be expected to attend Scrutiny Committee. So I think the short answer is yes.
Thank you. We've been asking for that over the last 2 years and we haven't managed to achieve it. Thank you.
I think, Councillor Reynolds, just to add to that, actually, is worth saying that I think the intention here is to have tighter performance monitoring within, between the council and Celtic Leisure. It's been very focused on a very regular basis on the finances, given what's happened over the last couple of years. But we would expect that to be something that comes before members and have that and have a revert, I suppose, to a more contractual relationship in a partnership kind of way as going forward.
Thank you. Diolch yn fawr. Any other questions on the public report, please? No, I've just got one question. I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer it. I think, Hugh, we may have to come to you on this, if you don't mind. I'm just wondering if we have any idea of what possible increase in council tax we would see to all residents of MPT should we insource in the current financial climate?
Well, 1% council tax generates £750,000. So obviously £1.5 million increase in cost would equate to equivalent to 2% council tax.
And that would be for all residents. So.
Well, everybody, yes, yeah, across the board.
Thank you. Diolch. So if there aren't any more questions, we'll move to the private appendices B and C attached at agenda item 10A. The documents are private. Sorry, Councillor Goldif-John, did you want to ask a question? Okay,
No,
thank
it's okay,
you.
Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. I propose access to meetings to resolve to exclude the public for the following items pursuant to section 100A 4 and 5 of the Local Government Act 1972 and the relevant exempt paragraphs of Part 4 of Schedule 12A to the above Act. Can I please have a seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
Diolch. Are there any abstentions, please?
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will assume that you are in agreement with access to meetings and that we now move to private.
I can see no indications to the contrary, Chair.
Can I please ask the